All right. So I got your submissions for your SLP presentations. I will get through those somewhere over the next few days. And if you indicated that you were okay with having it shared publicly, we'll be posting those onto the ENGRCS website in a video area where people can come in from outside and see what sorts of things students are working on. I think about a quarter of the class missed the hard deadline, which may not be as hard as I suggested. Yeah, so there's always issues with uploading things. There's always issues when video is involved, and there's absolutely always issues whenever you try something new, if it involves computers especially. It rarely works the way that one would expect or hope. And even if it worked a few months ago, it may not work, a few months later. So yeah, just plan ahead and leave yourself time, and if you're not ready to upload your video, do a test upload, make sure you have an account and you know how to upload and so on and so forth. YouTube, the upload can be slow, although it's not really YouTube. Usually it's just upload links are a lot slower than download, and we don't usually notice because we don't upload a whole lot when we're on the web. We're mostly pulling stuff down, but where a download speed might be hundreds of meg, and upload might be 10 megabits. So it's usually a discrepancy there. Anyway, got your upload links, and I will look through those and post grades as soon as possible. So my plan was to play around with Android a little bit today. So Android, if you have an Android phone, it's the operating system that sits underneath most cell phones, unless you use an iPhone. And Android is, the tools are freely available. You can take the code you write and push it to your phone without, having to get any special licensing or anything like that. It's all very open. The underlying code is Java, and there's simply, huge packages of classes that support interacting with all of the hardware and software on the phone. So it's a similar feel to what we've been doing with Eclipse and what we've been doing with Window Builder and Swing to make graphical interfaces, dragging and dropping buttons and so on and so forth. There are differences, and if you just hop into Android Studio, which is their development IDE, and you start trying to develop, it's often a frustrating experience. And I've suffered this myself multiple times. So what I want to go through today is just kind of a very, very streamlined overview of how to get an app up on the air, right? How to write something with buttons and text fields and interact with it and do some painting and mouse interaction and so on. Just to kind of give you a framework, one for comparison and contrast to what we've been doing with Eclipse and Window Builder and Swing, and two, if you're interested in playing around more with Android, hopefully this will cut down on some of the issues that you might run into, but certainly not all of them. So if you Google Android Studio, right, you should find a link, developerandroid.com. Make sure it's android.com, okay, not some other helpful site that's serving up this stuff with extra code inside. And if you just go to download Android Studio, for me there's just a button right here. Now I'm on Linux, so I hit this, it'll pull down the whole Studio package. There's nothing for me to install on Linux. It's just a big directory tree, and I just run this studio.sh script to kick things off. But on different platforms you'll have different processes to go from downloading to being able to run. Developer Android Studio is a pretty good site for finding tutorials, for getting help on classes and so on. Um, and let me mention up front that there's this language called Kotlin. Kotlin is similar to Java but different. It's an attempt to do Java but with some changes to things that some people didn't like about Java. The way that you declare variables, things like that. But it runs on the Java virtual machine. Okay, so we have an x86 processor in our laptop. We can write code in C. We can write code in C#. We can, have these different languages that can compile down. I don't know if C#'s compiled. We can write code in C. We can write code in Pascal or whatever. Compile it down. It'll run on the same underlying CPU, right? Well, with the Java virtual machine, that's a virtual CPU. Normally, we compile Java down to bytecode to run on that. Kotlin's another language that we can compile down to bytecode, and it'll run on the same JVM. And Kotlin seems to be recently the language of choice for doing a lot of Android development. But if you know Java and you get a little bit of sample code, you can switch over to Kotlin. And if you know Kotlin, you can switch back to Java, right? It's not like you need to take a course in it to use it. But I'm going to stick with Java because that's what we've been doing in this course so far. And I've already downloaded this this bundle of code. And I have an alias set up which pops me over to the script for starting all of this stuff. And studio.sh is just, it's a shell script, right? That's basically used to kick off the studio code. And look, there's Zenity right there. So Zenity is alive and well. And we don't need to worry about what any of that stuff does. So I'm just going to do studio. And I can actually throw this in the background. Alright, so you get a splash screen like this. So let me warn you up front, this is a moving target. Okay, when I first started playing with Android, everything was done in Eclipse. You would download plugins for Eclipse that would let you do Android development. It was really slow. And so things have gone to Android Studio, which is basically IntelliJ. Okay. And it's a moving target. Every time that it updates, some things change, some things go away, new things come in. So if you've done Android development successfully and you go away for a year and come back, you're going to have to relearn some things and unlearn some other things. And that's just kind of, what you get with a modern platform. So let's start a new Android Studio project. And you've got a set of options for different kinds of activities. I'm just going to stick with an empty activity. Okay, it's going to give us a minimal amount of stuff to start with, and we're going to build on top of it. So I'm going to do empty activity, and let's call it 223A June. I don't know why. All right, you can choose whether you want to use Java or Kotlin. I'm going to use Java. Set this up to some location that you want your projects to be saved in. I've already done that. And then you get to specify what's the minimum level of the software development kit. Okay, I've been using API 26. It's Oreo. If you do Android 30, it'll say your app will run on less than 1% of devices. And if you do 23, it's going to run on 85% of devices. So this is not super critical, but Android 8 seems to be a nice kind of middle of the road. Runs on lots of devices, and my old phones that I have that I use sometimes for this all run Oreo. But every time that you get an upgrade on your Android phone and it moves you to a new version of the operating system, right? That's what this is. So if you move to 8.1, you can run something that was made for 8.1 or lower. So I'm just going to leave that at Android 8. I'm going to say finish, and then I get my fantastic window popping up with not a lot happening. But there's some code written for me, okay? And there's an XML file here that I don't see any purpose for, so I'm just going to close it out because it confuses things. So there's code folding, right? There's a bunch of statements here where it says import. I can expand what's in there. Well, it's 2 import statements, but I can shrink that up if I don't want it taking real space. There's a default method called onCreate, and I can shrink that if I don't want to see it. So this is a whole IDE. Okay, this makes Eclipse look like Notepad, right? It will read your mind and it will write code for you while you sleep if you have the right plugin. And that's either really good or really annoying, depending on what you like. So there's lots of things you can do with IntelliJ that some of which I know, most of which I don't. Okay, but you can really sort of get into it and make this the way that you do coding. Okay. So Android is different from Linux, it's different from Windows or DOS, it's different from most other operating systems out there. In some sense, when your phone boots up, all of your apps are running. Now they're not actually running and taking CPU time, but you know how when you feel like your phone is not running as fast as it should, you do this kind of thing where you look at your apps and you start clearing those out and so on, right? The reason that those things are sitting there is because when you close an app, when you go back to the home screen or you X out of an app or something, the app does not necessarily die. Okay, it's a very different life cycle from a program running under Linux, where we type the program name or click an icon and it starts to run, and when it exits, it is done, right? A lot of these apps are sitting in the background and they're being managed by the operating system, by Android. If memory is needed and there's an app that hasn't been used in a while and is taking a lot of memory, Android may kill that, okay? But just because you leave a program or hit the home button doesn't mean that app has ended. Okay, so it's a very different kind of life cycle, and that was a weird thing to wrap my brain around. So this is called when the app is created, okay, and this is just boilerplate code. But one of the things that's happening in here, right, besides calling the superclasses onCreate method, is the set content view, and it's using an argument of something r.layout.activityMain. Okay, without worrying why it's called that. If I come down here under app and I go into resources and I go into layout, I will see an activityMain.xml. I want to open that up. That's the main thing I'm going to drag and drop into when I'm designing my app. Okay, so it's set up right now with just kind of this simple background with one text view that contains the string hello world. Okay, so I can click on that and I can change the text and say, you know, hello 223. All right, and I can take different things from here. I could take a button and I could drag it into here, and there's a button, and so on. All right, so this button I just dragged, there's a little exclamation mark here which says that basically this button is not positioned anywhere. Let's see if I can make it talk to me. Or not. Alright, anyway, it's saying the view is not constrained, right? And it may not be visible when the app runs. We'll talk about that in a minute. Let's go ahead and see what this app does. So up here I'm going to say I want to use an Android virtual device. Okay, so there's a whole subsystem of Android Studio that lets you create basically a simulated phone. Okay, and I've already created one. It's a Pixel 3. It's running API version 28, and it's got a big SD card inside, right? But you can create your own virtual devices. You can choose what kind of phone you want. So there's Pixels, there's Nexus, Galaxy, and so on and so forth. I have not had luck making this work for Wear operating system, but you know, presumably. So you can pick and choose your virtual device. I'm going to go with this one that I've already made, and I'm going to select that up here, Pixel 3, and I'm just going to hit this little play button next to it. Okay, what that's going to do is it's going to initialize this phone, right, boot it up, and load my code into it. Alright, and so down here it said install successfully finished in 537 milliseconds. There's my hello 223. There's my button. I can click on the button, it doesn't do anything. I can click on this, it doesn't do anything. Okay, but that's my app. And the first thing to note is, you know, my button was supposed to be right here. It's actually up there. We'll come to that in a second. Okay, I can close this out, and let me remove that. So what did I call this thing? I called it 223A June. So if I come in here, there's my 223A June. I'm going to drag this onto my desktop, right? And this is a whole simulated phone, right? It has Chrome running on it, and I won't bother signing in. And you know, it understands my keyboard. So I can put in a URL, and there's, you know, our ENGRCS web page, and so on and so forth. It's a really nice emulator, right? And this was the thing that used to be horrible under Eclipse. This was so slow. I've got a pretty fast machine here, so this is running well. I suspect it runs faster under Linux than Windows, only because that's been my experience. Does not imply cause and effect. But if you don't have to wait for this thing every time you do something, your life gets a whole lot more pleasant with development, right? So, but you know, you can drag up to see your apps, and you can go to the Play Store and download things or whatever. So it's a nice emulation. And so I've downloaded this. I've pushed this app over to my phone, and I can just tap on that and bring up my code. Right, so it's executing. And again, you know, if I hit this thing, I can see all of the things that are running, and if I really want, I can close them out by, you know, swiping up. Right, and then I can run this, and it'll come back. All right, so let's. I'm just going to leave this thing running in the background. Let's play around with this. So when I click on this text field, there's these springs connecting it to the edges. And if I move this somewhere else, like down here, and I rerun this, my text view will move down here. Okay, my button is always slammed in the upper left corner. It's because I don't have these little arrows. So I don't know why this is so hard to find in online documentation. Maybe I looked in the wrong places. But you've got to basically hook this thing up to anchor points. Well, okay. I'm just going to anchor it to the bottom. Alright, so now I can place my button where I want. Let's put it right below my hello 223. And let's run this. Alright, so we can place things, and you know, the idea is that if you're making an app that can work on, you know, hundreds of different kinds of phones with different layouts and different dimensions, you don't want to just say put my button at 50, 50, put my text field at 50, 120, right? So you anchor these things to edges or to each other, and you do that so that as the window size changes, you know, these things move around and they stay placed relatively where you want them. And you can play around with the window size by grabbing a corner down here. When I do that, it breaks my code if I'm not careful. So I'm not going to do that. But anyway, so that's the basic layout. Okay. Now, I'm looking at my graphical view up here. If I come over here, I can look at the source code. Okay, so this is like the design versus code tab in Window Builder. This is what this actually corresponds to. Right, so I've got a text view and I've got a button, and here's my text view and here's my button. And my text view is constrained. Bottom of the text view goes to the bottom of the parent, right? The left of the text view goes to the left of the parent, and so on. And I've got a button. So the name of the text view is text view. The name of the button is button. So if I want to change this, I could change my button name. Come up here under ID, I could call it Go. And now if I look at my code, my button is labeled as having an ID of Go. Okay, so this is XML. I don't know if you're familiar with XML. It's another markup language, basically. Things are contained by angle brackets. We can have an angle bracket to start something, a slash angle bracket to end. The first thing in here is the type of tag it is, and then depending on the type of tag, we can have other fields in here. It's a completely general purpose way to describe hierarchical arrangements of data. And this is the way that these layouts for Android apps are set up, right? So, all right, and you can mess with this if you're careful, right? So I can change this to say hi 223, and now if I look at the layout, my text view is saying hi 223. All right, so let's interact with these widgets. Let's make them actually do something. So I'm going to write my code in my main activity, and I'm going to make a new method. Okay, so I'm going to say public void go button, and it's going to take an argument of type view. And what do I want to do in here? Let's just print a message. Okay, so how do we print a message? An easy way is to say log dot, and we can say I want to print a debug message. We can say I want to print an error message, an information message, a verbose message, and so on. So let's just do a log dot information. And you can specify two things. The first thing is sort of the category to which this message belongs. So I'm just going to call this demo. And then I can put in a message that I actually want, which was go button clicked. Alright, so I'm going to dump this onto my emulated phone. I missed my semicolon. Alright, and then view needs to be imported, so same thing, I'm just going to hover over that and do Alt-Shift-Enter. And then log needs to be imported, so I'll hover over that and do Alt-Shift-Enter. So unlike Eclipse, this does not automatically compile every time that you make a change. Okay, but it will yell at you as you're typing sometimes and say, hey, you didn't do this. So let's dump that onto our phone. So there's our app running. So let me organize this a little differently. I'll put this over here. I'll put this over here. All right. So, so down here on the bottom there's a tab Logcat. Okay, I'm going to click on that and I'm going to say I want to look at messages from my emulated device. And verbose means show me every message, so information, debug, warnings, errors, and so on. If I just want info, I can just do that one. So let's click on the button. And nothing happens. I meant to do that. Okay, So the reason nothing happens is because we have not hooked up this button click to this method yet. All I've done is made a method called goButton. Okay, so let's go back to our activity main. Let's click on the button. Let's come over here where it says on click. Hit the drop down button. It gives us the option of calling goButton. Okay, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to push this over to the device. And now I'm going to click on the button. And there's a message saying the go button got clicked. Okay, so this is an easy way to do what we do with, you know, system out print line. We don't have a console here, right? We have this whole environment on this phone, but we don't have you know, something where we can just print out to our screen. So so the log utility is an easy way to put messages on here. And so we'll do that. All right, let me show you at this point. So here's my phone. And I have it hooked up through a USB-C cable going into my laptop. And up here I have the option of selecting my phone. So Essential Products PH1. Okay, it's an essential phone. So I'm going to say let's push that over, and let's go back here and watch. And instead of pushing it to the emulator, it's going to push it to my phone, and I can hit the button here. And over here on my logcat, if I switch this to say show me messages coming from my Android device, if I hit the button, I get these messages saying that the go button was clicked. And I can be verbose and see all the messages coming from here. Alright, so and I can close that out. Alright, so here's my 223A app. I can run that and bring my app back up and so on. Alright, so it's convenient to develop on an emulator, but it's very straightforward to push stuff over to an actual device also. Right, basically plug it in, and if it doesn't recognize it, come down here and say troubleshoot device connections. And usually if you say rescan devices, it will figure out that you've got an actual piece of hardware connected and go from there. And sometimes you need to do some stuff on your phone. I'm not going to go into it because we don't have time, but you need to do some stuff on your phone first time you do this to turn on developer mode, and you can find lots of documentation for that online. You basically go into you know, somewhere in your settings and you click a button like 7 times in a row and it turns on developer mode. It's cute. Alright, so we'll stick with the emulator for now. And let's do more code development. So let me give myself more space here. Alright, so I want to play around with what happens when I press this button. So right now I'm just printing out a log message. Let's display something in that text field. Alright, so this is a little weird. No, this is very weird, I'll be honest. So I'm going to make a text view object called message, and I will import that. Alright, so I want to send a message out to that text view. I need to get access to that text view object. In our docs programs, we typically did that by having, you know, one method in an object call something like save parent, so that another object could save the identity of that first object in a local variable, right? And that's a little goofy. So there's a unified way to get access to different objects inside Android. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say message, that's my text view, equals find view by ID. I'm going to say r.id dot, and going to put in the ID of it. r.id. And I think I don't think I called that text view anything, so let's give it a name. Let me call this thing message box. Alright, so this thing is called message box. So I'm going to say r.id.message box. And this is a lowercase d. Alright, so that's all happy. And you know, if it doesn't know what this thing is, it will warn me here. But I do have an object named message box, so this will find that and it'll return a reference to that text view. And now I can just say text message set text, and I can set up a text message in there. Alright, so let's run this. Oh, I'm going to my phone. Let's run it on the emulator. Alright, so there's my button, there's my text view, that's the default message I put in. Let's click the button, and it changes the text value. Alright, I also pushed it over to my phone, accidentally. And so, you know, this runs on my phone. I hit the button, and it changes that to hello. Alright. So here's the life cycle thing. Let's say I go back home to exit that, and I say let's rerun this program. It still says hello, right? And I can go home and I can say let's run it again, and it still says hello. Now if I go away for a few hours and I come back and I run this, it will probably say 223A, right? But it hasn't died. It's still out there, which means the value of that text field is still whatever it was. Now if I come in here and I swipe up to kill that, and then I say let's run this, it says hi 223. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind, because it's unusual compared to other things. All right, so I'm going to hop onto my Zoom here because I think I'm done guinea pigging my phone. I want to see if there's like questions coming in. And when I do this, I don't see any messages that have already come through, so if you send a question or something, you're going to have to please resend it again. But I got my chat window up now. Alright, so we can interact with these widgets, right? So we can do sort of the usual things like you know, initialize an integer and set our text to increment the value of I and use that as our message that we're going to display. So I think I killed my emulator. That's sad. And we'll boot it back up. Wow, where'd my emulator go? There it went. Alright, so let's dump this in again. Here's my code, so I can hit the button, and now it counts up values of I. And again, you know, if I just like go home and I rerun this, it picks up where it left off. But if I swipe this thing away to deliberately kill it, Then when I run it, it gets recreated, which means the string gets initialized and so on and so forth. I still got my log message down here. All right. Another thing we can do is we can make toast. So this is the other way that you can do quick. You know, just want to display some piece of information. If you're doing this on your phone, you don't have Android Studio running in the background where you can read these log messages. Another way to do this is to use toast. So toast, I didn't make this up. Toast is for making pop-ups. Okay. So toast.makeText. Get application context, paren, comma, this is a pop-up, toast dot, and let's make it a short pop-up, and let's say show. Alright, toast has to be imported. Alright. Don't need to know what all of this stuff means, right? If you dig into the toast class, there's a static method called makeText that, you know, takes an argument, which is your application context, and the actual message you want to display, and then the length of the message, and then we're calling the show method on that object, and this will basically make a pop-up. So let's push this over. And now when I hit the button, I get my little thing down at the bottom saying this is a pop-up. And it's a short length, so it only stays up for a few seconds. You can make it long, and it stays for like 5 seconds or something. But if you know, do that too often, then you get a pop-up that like lingers around for a long time. So I'll get rid of the toast. All right, let's interact with the mouse or with your finger. So we're going to write a listener basically. So public boolean on touch event. And it'll take an argument of type motion event, which we'll call EV. And let's just use our text field. So you know, I'm going to change this to go inside our create method, and I'm going to leave message up here so that when I create the app, I'll assign a value to message, and then I can just use message whenever I want. And I'm going to get rid of this too. So let me make sure this still works. So Android Studio, for me, it's a good thing to make sure that you're doing only one thing at a time, right? Because you can make one small mistake and it comes out in really weird ways. All right, so that's all good. So let's do something inside our touch event. So let's just print out the XY coordinates of the touch event. So I can do ev.getX plus a comma plus ev.getY. And I'll just set my text equal to that. So now I'll go ahead and run this. And, you know, I can do my button as usual. But if I come out here and I click, I get the XY coordinates on my mouse click. And if I hold my button down and I drag, I can see my coordinates update as I move around. So you can pick up, you know, taps on the display by just making an on-touch event. Now, I wrote this in the main activity, and you'll notice if I go up here to the upper left corner, I'm not at 0, 0. My X is close to 0, but my Y is 200 some, right? 0, 0 is actually way up here in the upper left of the whole display. So if I wanted to do some drawing in here, I'd have an offset to worry about. Okay, we can deal with that pretty easily. But you're seeing the basic parallels here, right? This is stuff that we do with Window Builder, with Swing, and it's just a different mechanism, different set of mechanisms. All right, so let's do some drawing. So let's come back in here and let's get rid of all of this stuff. Alright, so my XML should be pretty minimal at this point. Alright, I'm going to make a view, and I have to find it. There's a view. Alright, so I'm dropping a view in here. A view is kind of like a panel. It's something that we can draw on by using things like, fill rectangle, draw oval, stuff like that. Okay, so I have a view. It's called view. It's an object of type view. And I'm going to make myself a new class. So let's make a new Java class. I'm going to call it my view, and I'm going to extend the view class. I don't want swing view though, so I'll just type this in. So extends view, and we'll alt enter that. Alright, and it tells us there's no default constructor. We have to write our own constructor for this. And this is more boilerplate stuff. So public my view, and it takes a context. And we're basically going to call views constructor. And then we're going to make a paint object. So let's alt enter this. Let's alt enter that. And this is going to be an object of type paint. No. All right, we're good to go. All right, so so the constructor is going to call the superclasses constructor, and it's going to make a new paint object. Okay. Let's make a circle. So so instead of public void paint, we're going to do protected void on draw, and it's going to take an argument of type canvas, which is basically like graphics G, but it's got to be different. So we're going to get a canvas, and the canvas is the thing that we're going to do our drawing on. So we'll do superclasses on draw. We'll pass the canvas method, the canvas object. So that does the default drawing, and then let's just do paint set color, and let's do color.blue, and color needs to be imported. And then let's do canvas.draw circle. So X, Y, and radius. And it fills in these parameter specifications for you because it's modern. But it's just X, Y, and radius. So this will do what we've been doing with the paint method, right? this my view, when it's painted, is going to call the onDraw method, which will call the default onDraw, and then it'll set the background color for this paint object to be blue, which will be used when we say draw a circle. Alright, so our main activity is set up to set content view. Let me get rid of this message stuff. Let me get rid of this. Let me get rid of this. Let me get rid of my button code. Alright, so set content view, instead of doing our layout activity main, I'm going to hardwire a my view. So I've got this my view that what doesn't it like about this? Canvas.drawCircle. Oh, and yeah, you need to tell it what your paintbrush is. So paint. Alright, so paint is basically like a paintbrush, right? I've set the color to it, you can set the width and all that kind of stuff, and then you pass that as an argument to your draw circle method. Alright, so there's what my view is defined as, and let's go ahead and see if we can make that error go away. Nope. And I did something really bad. So I should have just done File, New Class, but I right-clicked and created my new class outside of the right folder it should have been in. So I just moved it up into here so it's in the same package that the other thing is in. Alright, so let's see if we can get lucky and make this thing work. So let's run this and fire up the app, and there's our blue circle. Alright, we have success. Alright, so that's pretty hurried along, I understand. But it's you know, it's the essential parallels to what we've been doing. If we want to force a repaint, instead of calling repaint, we call invalidate. So if we say my view dot invalidate paren, that'll force the call to onDraw, which will update the display. So for example, I displayed this based on mouse coordinates. I could load those coordinates in the onTouch listener, and then I could call invalidate, and that would cause onDraw to be called, and my circle would be displayed in a new location. Alright. Alright. We are out of time, but anyway, that's hopefully gets you at least on the air, right? I made it through like 2 of my 5 examples, but that's okay. Alright, so I'll be in office hours at 11 and then again at 3. So I'll catch you next time. Thanks.